A massive alien ship called Astral Dawn moved slowly through the dark space between stars. Its hull was covered with panels that usually glowed bright blue, but now they flickered weakly like dying fireflies. Inside the ship, hundreds of tall, thin aliens called Zephyrians walked through the corridors with worry written all over their translucent faces. Commander Vex-High stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars ahead. His long crystalline fingers tapped nervously against the control panel, making tiny clicking sounds that echoed in the quiet room. The sound had become constant over the past few days, and everyone knew what it meant. Their leader was scared. And if he was scared, they all should be terrified. The problem was simple, but deadly. Their food machines had broken down 3 weeks ago, during their journey to a new world. These machines could make any food they wanted from basic materials. But now they sat silent and cold. The repair crews had tried everything they knew, but nothing worked. Their emergency food supplies were almost gone, maybe enough for 2 more days if they were careful. Dr. Kira Wells sat in the corner of the bridge, watching the aliens panic. She was the only human on the ship, part of a program where different species shared knowledge with each other. The Zephyrians had invited her to study their advanced technology, but now she found herself watching them fall apart when their technology failed them. Kira was 32 years old with brown hair and green eyes. She came from a small farm in Iowa where her family had taught her that when something broke, you fixed it with your hands and whatever tools you could find. The Zephyrians were different. They had built machines to build their machines, and when those broke, they seemed lost. The aliens around her were getting more nervous by the hour. Their skin, which normally glowed with a soft blue light, was getting dimmer. Some of the younger crew members had stopped glowing entirely, which Kira had learned was a bad sign. It meant they were getting weak and sick. Captain Zorthik, the ship's leader, was even taller than the others, with longer arms that ended in 4-fingered hands. His voice was deep and musical when he spoke their language, but lately he had been speaking in short, sharp words that everyone understood meant trouble. Dr. Wells, Commander Vex-High said, turning away from the window to look at her. His English was perfect, though it sounded strange coming from his alien throat. Your people have experience with survival situations, do they not? Kira nodded. Some of us do. My grandfather used to tell stories about living through hard times when technology failed. The commander's large black eyes blinked slowly. Our food synthesizers are beyond repair with the tools we have available. We carry emergency rations for exactly this situation, but they will not last long enough for us to reach our destination. Through the ship's windows, Kira could see a bright star growing larger ahead of them. Around it was a small blue-green planet covered in swirling clouds. Even from this distance, she could see it was alive. The night side of the world glowed, with millions of tiny lights, like someone had scattered glitter across its surface. That's our destination, Vex-High continued. Kepler 442b. Our surveys show it has life, including organisms that could provide the nutrition we need. But we face a problem our ancestors never encountered. Dr. Kintar, the ship's scientist, floated over to join them. Her body was even more translucent than the others, and Kira could see her internal organs glowing softly through her skin. The planet contains the larvae stage of energy-rich organisms we call Glow-Beetles. They are exactly what we need to survive, but capturing them presents difficulties. Kira leaned forward, interested. What kind of difficulties? Our species evolved beyond the need for primitive hunting and gathering millions of years ago, Kintar explained. Our tools are designed for advanced energy manipulation and quantum-level precision work. We have never needed to catch small, fast-moving creatures with our bare hands. The human woman tried not to smile. These aliens could build ships that traveled between stars, could manipulate energy like she manipulated clay, could solve mathematical problems that would take her years to understand. But they couldn't catch bugs. Commander Vexhai seemed to read her thoughts. I know it sounds impossible to your kind, Dr. Wells. Humans are natural hunters and survivors. But our people have not faced such challenges for countless generations. Our bodies are not built for such activities, and our minds think only in terms of technological solutions. Around the bridge, other crew members were gathering to listen. Kira could see the fear in their dark eyes. These beings who could travel across the galaxy were afraid of starving to death because they couldn't figure out how to catch something smaller than her thumb. Show me, Kira said simply. Captain Zorthik touched a control panel, and the main screen lit up with images from the planet below. The surface was covered with strange forests that glowed in patterns of blue, green, and purple. Flying through the trees were millions of tiny creatures that looked like fireflies, but much brighter. Glow-Beetles, Dr. Kintar said. Each one contains enough energy to feed one of us for several days. The planet has billions of them, more than enough to sustain our entire crew while we repair our synthesizers. Kira watched the creatures dance through the alien trees. They moved in patterns, clustering around certain plants and spreading out during different times of the day. They look fast. Very fast, Commander Vexhai agreed. And our attempts to capture them have been failures. Our energy nets simply pass through them. Our containment fields are too large and clumsy. Our weapons destroy them completely. The human woman continued watching the screen. The beetles seemed to have intelligence, working together in small groups and responding to changes in their environment. But they were still just insects, following predictable patterns that any good hunter would recognize. How long before we reach orbit? She asked. 6 hours, Captain Zorthik replied. Then we must decide whether to attempt landing parties or continue to our original destination and hope we can survive the journey. Kira stood up and stretched. Around her, dozens of advanced aliens watched her every movement, hoping she might have some miracle solution that their superior technology had missed. She didn't want to disappoint them, but she also didn't want to promise something she couldn't deliver. I'd like to go down to the planet with the first landing party, she said finally. The aliens looked at each other with expressions she couldn't quite read. Finally, Commander Vexhai nodded slowly. Very well, Dr. Wells. Perhaps your primitive human instincts will see something our advanced minds have overlooked. The emergency meeting room on the Astral Dawn had never seen so many worried faces at one time. Captain Zorthik stood at the head of the long table while his senior officers sat around him with their internal lights flickering weakly. The ship's life support systems were working harder now, trying to keep everyone alive as their bodies grew weaker from hunger. Dr. Kira Wells sat quietly in her chair, watching the aliens argue in their musical language. She couldn't understand most of their words, but their body language told her everything she needed to know. They were running out of time and running out of ideas. Commander Vexhai stood up and switched to English so Kira could follow along. Our repair teams have attempted 17 different approaches to fix the food synthesizers. Each attempt has failed, and each failure uses more of our remaining power reserves. Chief Engineer Mordak, a shorter Zephyrian with arms covered in tool attachments, made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. The quantum matrix is completely corrupted. We would need replacement parts that we simply do not carry. Even if we had them, the installation would require more energy than we have left. The room fell silent except for the quiet humming of the ship's engines. Through the walls, Kira could hear other crew members moving through the corridors, their footsteps slower than before. The whole ship felt tired. Dr. Kintar activated a holographic display showing the planet below them. The world spun slowly, covered in the dancing lights of billions of glow-beetles. Our sensors confirm that the organisms we need are present in abundance. The planet's ecosystem is perfect for our nutritional requirements. But we cannot catch them, Captain Zorthik said with frustration. Our hunting parties have returned empty-handed 3 times now. Lieutenant Hex Ron, one of the younger officers, spoke up. Sir, our energy nets are designed for capturing large space debris and asteroids. When we tried to use them on the beetles, the creatures simply flew between the energy beams. Our containment fields work the same way, added another officer. They are meant to hold objects much larger than these tiny organisms. The beetles escape through gaps we cannot even see. Kira leaned forward. What about your weapons? Can you stun them instead of killing them? The aliens looked at each other uncomfortably. Commander Vex High cleared his throat. We attempted that approach as well, Dr. Wells. Our plasma weapons have power settings that should theoretically stun small creatures without harming them. But, Kira prompted, the Glow-Beetles are more delicate than our instruments can measure. Even our lowest power setting completely destroys them. They simply vanish in small puffs of light. Dr. Kintar brought up recordings from their hunting attempts on the main screen. Kira watched as groups of Zephyrians moved clumsily through the alien forest, carrying devices that looked like science fiction weapons. The beetles danced around them like they were playing a game, always staying just out of reach. In one recording, she watched a Zephyrian try to grab a beetle with his bare hands. His long fingers moved slowly and awkwardly, like someone trying to catch a butterfly while wearing thick gloves. The beetle waited until the last second, then zipped away so fast it left a trail of light behind it. Your people move differently than humans do, Kira observed. You're more graceful in some ways, but also more deliberate. These beetles are probably reacting to your movements before you even get close. That is correct, Dr. Kintar agreed. Our species evolved for precision and careful thought. We do not have the quick reflexes that hunting requires. Our ancestors eliminated the need for such skills long ago. Captain Zorthik touched another control, and the screen showed their food storage areas. The containers that should have been full of emergency rations were nearly empty. We have perhaps 36 hours of food remaining. After that, our people will begin to enter starvation mode. What does that mean exactly? Kira asked. Our bodies will shut down non-essential functions to preserve energy, Commander Vex High explained. We will become weaker and slower. Our ability to think clearly will diminish. Eventually, we will enter a hibernation state from which we may not wake up. The human woman felt a chill run down her spine. These beings had saved her life when her research ship was destroyed by a meteor shower. They had welcomed her aboard their vessel and shared their knowledge freely. Now they were facing death because they couldn't solve a problem that seemed so simple to her. How many beetles would you need to keep everyone fed? She asked. Dr. Kintar consulted her instruments. Each adult Zephyrian requires approximately 12 beetles per day to maintain full health. We have 437 crew members, so we would need over 5,000 beetles daily. Kira did the math in her head. It sounded like a lot, but she had seen the recordings of the planet's surface. There were millions of the creatures. Down there, maybe billions. The problem wasn't finding them or having enough. The problem was catching them. What about traps? She suggested. Something that would attract them and hold them without harming them? Chief Engineer Mordok's tool. Attachments clicked together as he thought. We considered building attraction devices using light frequencies that appeal to them. But our analysis shows they are intelligent enough to avoid obvious traps. They learn from experience and share information with other beetles. They're smarter than regular insects, Kira mused. That makes them harder to catch, but also more predictable in some ways. Lieutenant Hexron looked confused. How does intelligence make them predictable? Because smart creatures follow patterns, Kira explained. They have habits and preferences. They make decisions based on what they've learned before. If you understand their behavior, you can use it against them. The room fell quiet as the aliens considered this. Finally, Commander Vex-High spoke. Dr. Wells, you seem to have insights that our people lack. Would you be willing to join our next surface expedition? Kira nodded without hesitation. When do we leave? In 2 hours, Captain Zorthik decided. We will take our smallest shuttle to conserve energy. If this mission fails like the others, we may not have power for another attempt. As the meeting broke up, Kira remained in her seat thinking. The Zephyrians were brilliant engineers and scientists, but they thought like machines. They approached every problem with technology and complicated solutions. Sometimes the best answer was the simplest one. She just hoped she could figure out what that simple answer was before it was too late for all of them. The shuttle bay doors opened with a soft hiss as the small Zephyrian craft descended toward the planet's surface. Dr. Kira Wells pressed her face against the window, watching the alien world grow larger below them. The forests glowed like Christmas. Trees, with patterns of light dancing through the branches in colors she had never seen before. Commander Vex-High sat across from her, his long fingers wrapped around a device that looked like a cross between a telescope and a weapon. Dr. Wells, I must be honest with you. Our previous expeditions were led by our most experienced hunters and our best scientists. If they could not succeed, I am not certain what you can accomplish that they could not. Kira smiled at him. Maybe? That's exactly the problem. Your people are too good at what they do. The commander's large black eyes blinked slowly. I do not understand. Sometimes being an expert makes things harder, not easier, Kira explained as she watched the Glow-Beetles swirling through the trees below. You think like scientists and engineers. You look for complicated solutions to complicated problems. But maybe this isn't a complicated problem. Lieutenant Hexron was piloting the shuttle with movements so smooth they barely felt like they were moving. His species could control machinery with their minds, making every action precise and calculated. Dr. Wells, these creatures have evaded our best efforts. How can the solution be simple? Before Kira could answer, the shuttle touched down in a clearing surrounded by tall trees that pulsed with soft blue light. The air outside was breathable for both species, though it smelled like flowers and electricity mixed together. As soon as they opened the hatch, thousands of Glow-Beetles came drifting toward them like living stars. Dr. Kintar immediately activated her scanning equipment, and the beetles scattered in all directions. Fascinating, she murmured, watching them flee. They respond to electromagnetic frequencies. Our instruments frighten them away. Turn them off, Kira suggested. The alien scientist looked shocked. But how will we study their behavior patterns without proper measurement tools? With your eyes, Kira said simply. Just watch them. Reluctantly, Dr. Kintar powered down her devices. Within minutes, the Glow-Beetles began returning to the clearing. They moved in small groups, clustering around certain flowers that glowed brighter than others. Some beetles would land on a flower for a few seconds, then fly to another one. Others danced in circles above the plants, creating patterns of light that almost looked like writing. Kira sat down on a fallen log and pulled off her hiking boots. The Zephyrians watched in confusion as she removed her socks and stuffed them into her backpack. What are you doing? Commander Vex-High asked. Getting comfortable, Kira replied. My grandfather always said you can't hunt when you're thinking. Too hard. You have to feel what the animals are doing. Lieutenant Hexron moved closer to a cluster of beetles, his energy net device ready. The creatures immediately flew away from him, staying just beyond his reach. He tried moving slower, then faster, then in different directions. Nothing worked. The beetles seemed to know exactly where he was going before he did. "They're reading your intentions," Kira observed. "You're broadcasting your plan before you execute it." "That is impossible," Dr. Kentar said. "These are simple organisms. They cannot read minds." "Not minds," Kira corrected. "Body language. Look at how Hexron moves when he's trying to catch them. His shoulders tense up. His arms position themselves for the grab. His eyes focus on his target. The beetles see all of that and react." She stood up and walked slowly toward a different group of beetles. Her movements were relaxed and casual, like she was just taking a walk through the forest. The creatures continued their dance around the glowing flowers, paying her no attention. "Observe their patterns," she said quietly to the aliens. "They visit the bright flowers first, then the dimmer ones. They prefer to approach from the upwind side. They stay in groups of 3 to 7 individuals. They have a leader in each group who makes the first move." Commander Vex High activated his recording device to capture her observations, but the beetles immediately scattered again. "Turn it off," Kira said without looking back at him. "They don't like your machines." For the next hour, Kira simply sat and watched. The Zephyrians grew increasingly frustrated as their equipment remained silent and their sophisticated hunting techniques continued to fail. But Kira was learning things that no machine could teach her. The beetles had preferences. They liked flowers that were exactly the right shade of blue-green. They avoided areas where the air moved too much. They became more active as the alien sun began to set, and they worked together to find the best feeding spots. "There," Kira said suddenly, pointing to a cluster of 7 beetles working on a particularly bright flower. "That group has been visiting the same 3 flowers for 20 minutes. They have a routine." She reached into her backpack and pulled out one of her cotton socks. The Zephyrians stared at the simple piece of clothing like it was the strangest technology they had ever seen. "What is that device?" Dr. Kintar asked. "It's not a device. It's just a sock," Kira replied. "Cotton fabric. My grandmother knitted it." Lieutenant Hexron looked confused. "How does cotton fabric catch glow-beetles?" Instead of answering, Kira showed them. She held the sock loosely in her right hand, like a small net. Then she positioned herself downwind from the beetle cluster and waited. The aliens watched in fascination as she became perfectly still, barely even breathing. The beetles continued their pattern, moving from flower to flower in the same sequence they had been following. Kira tracked their movement with her eyes, but kept her body relaxed. She was reading their rhythm, learning to predict where they would go next. When the lead beetle approached the flower nearest to her, Kira moved. It wasn't a grab or a swipe. It was more like scooping water from a stream. Her hand swept gently through the air, and the sock billowed out like a tiny parachute. 3 glow-beetles found themselves inside the cotton fabric before they even realized they were in danger. They glowed brighter in their confusion, but they weren't hurt. Kira carefully gathered the mouth of the sock closed, creating a soft prison that held the creatures safely. The Zephyrians stood in stunned silence. Their advanced minds struggled to process what they had just witnessed. No energy fields, no quantum calculations, no sophisticated targeting systems. Just a human woman with a piece of cloth, using skills that their species had forgotten millions of years ago. "How?" Commander Vex High whispered. Kira smiled as she gently transferred the beetles to one of their collection containers. "Sometimes the old ways work better than the new ways. You just have to remember that simple doesn't mean stupid." The 3 glow-beetles buzzed softly inside their container, their light pulsing in gentle waves that reminded Kira of breathing. Commander Vex High held the container like it contained the most precious treasure in the universe, which in many ways it did. His people were dying, and these tiny creatures represented hope. "Show us again," Dr. Kintar said, her voice filled with wonder and disbelief. Please demonstrate the technique once more so we can understand the mechanics. Kira looked around the clearing and spotted another group of beetles dancing around a purple flower that glowed like a small lamp. First, you have to understand that this isn't really about the sock, she explained. The sock is just a tool. The real trick is thinking like they do. Lieutenant Hexron moved closer, his long arms hanging at his sides. How does one think? Like an insect? They're not just insects, Kira corrected. You said they're intelligent, remember? They make decisions based on what they learn, so you have to predict their decisions. She walked slowly toward the new group of beetles, her movements loose and natural. The Zephyrians followed behind her, trying to copy her relaxed posture, but looking awkward and stiff. Their bodies weren't built for casual movement. Every gesture was precise and purposeful. Watch their pattern, Kira said quietly. This group has 5 beetles, 4 followers, and 1 leader. The leader always checks a flower first, then the others follow. They visit 3 flowers in a triangle pattern and rest on that branch for exactly 30 seconds. The aliens observed the creatures for several minutes, taking mental notes instead of using their instruments. Slowly, they began to see what Kira was talking about. The beetles did have a routine. They weren't just flying randomly around the forest. Now watch their timing, Kara continued. The leader makes its move when the wind is calm. The followers wait for the leader's light to pulse twice before they join in, and they always approach from the left side of the flower. Dr. Kintar's eyes widened as she recognized the pattern. They are following a complex behavioral algorithm. But how did you determine this so quickly without proper analysis equipment? I grew up catching fireflies in my backyard, Kira said, with a smile. My dad taught me that every living thing has habits. You just have to be patient enough to see them. She pulled her second sock from her backpack and handed it to Lieutenant Hexron. Your turn. Remember, don't think about catching them. Think about being in the right place when they decide to fly there. The young Zephyrian took the cotton sock and examined it carefully. To his advanced mind, it seemed impossible that such a simple object could succeed where their technology had failed. But he had seen Kira do it, so he knew it was possible. Position yourself near the 3rd flower in their pattern, Kira instructed. Not too close. They need to feel safe enough to continue their routine. Hexron moved to where she indicated, holding the sock awkwardly in his 4-fingered hand. The beetles continued their dance, seemingly unaware of the new threat. But Kira could see they were watching him, evaluating whether he was dangerous. Relax your shoulders, she said. Don't look directly at them. Pretend you're interested in something else. The lieutenant tried to follow her instructions, but his movements were still too mechanical. The beetles sensed his tension and stayed farther away from their usual pattern. After several minutes, they abandoned their routine entirely and flew to a different part of the clearing. I failed, Hexron said with frustration. They detected my intentions. You're thinking too hard, Kira told him. Your species analyzes everything before acting. These beetles can sense that analytical energy. You need to act on instinct instead of calculation. Commander Vexhai stepped forward. Dr. Wells, our people have not relied on instinct for thousands of generations. We evolved beyond such primitive responses. How can we suddenly access abilities we no longer possess? Kira thought about this problem as she watched more beetles dancing through the forest around them. The Zephyrians had become so advanced that they had lost touch with the basic survival skills that every human child learned naturally. But maybe that was the answer. Don't try to be primitive, she said finally. Use your intelligence differently. Instead of analyzing the beetles, analyze yourself. Figure out how to turn off your analytical thinking on purpose. Dr. Kintar looked puzzled. Turn off our primary cognitive function? That seems counterproductive. Not turn it off completely, Kira clarified. Just quiet it down. Let your subconscious mind do the work instead of your conscious mind. She demonstrated by approaching another group of beetles. This time, she explained her thought process out loud. I'm not planning my next move. I'm just responding to what they do. When they shift left, I shift left. When they pause, I pause. I'm following their lead instead of trying to control the situation. As she spoke, she moved the sock through the air in a smooth motion that seemed to flow naturally from the beetle's own movements. 2 more creatures found themselves gently captured in the cotton fabric, their lights pulsing with surprise rather than fear. It is like a dance, Lieutenant Hexron observed with sudden understanding. You are dancing with them instead of hunting them. Exactly, Kira said, transferring the new beetles to another container. Hunting is about force and control. Dancing is about harmony and cooperation. Commander Vexhai tried next, using a spare piece of fabric from the shuttle's emergency supplies. His first several attempts failed as he overthought each movement. But gradually, he began to understand what Kira meant about quieting his analytical mind. Focus on the rhythm of their flight, Kira coached. Don't predict where they'll go. Just move with the flow of their energy. On his 6th attempt, the commander successfully captured a single beetle. His triumph was quiet but profound. For the first time in his life, he had solved a problem without using technology or complex analysis. He had used intuition. Dr. Kintar was next, then other members of the landing party. Each success built their confidence and helped them understand the technique better. Within 2 hours, the entire team was catching beetles regularly. Not every attempt worked, but enough did to make a real difference. As the alien sun began to set, they had collected over 200 Glow-Beetles. It wasn't enough to feed the entire crew, but it was proof that the method worked. More importantly, they had learned a new way of thinking that their species had forgotten. We must return to the ship and teach this technique to others, Commander, Vexhai said as they prepared to leave. How many crew members do you think can learn this skill? Kira looked at the containers full of glowing creatures and smiled. All of them. It just takes practice and patience. As their shuttle lifted off from the planet's surface, the forest below them continued to pulse with the lights of billions of Glow-Beetles. For the first time since their food crisis began, the Zephyrians felt hope instead of despair. The main hall of the Astral Dawn had never been so full of excited voices. Hundreds of Zephyrians gathered around the containers of Glow-Beetles, their internal lights growing brighter as hope returned to their hearts. The creatures pulsed with gentle rhythms, creating patterns of light that danced across the walls like living art. Dr. Kira Wells stood beside Commander Vexhai as Captain Zorthic addressed the crowd. The beetles they had collected were being prepared according to Zephyrian dietary needs, and the crew members who had eaten first were already showing signs of renewed strength. Their translucent skin glowed with healthy blue light, and their movements had become more energetic. My fellow travelers, Captain Zorthic announced, his deep voice carrying easily through the large space. Today, we have learned something that will change how we think about survival and problem-solving. Dr. Wells has shown us that sometimes the most advanced solution is to step backward and embrace simplicity. The crowd murmured in agreement, though Kira could see that many of them still looked confused. The idea that their sophisticated technology could be replaced by a piece of cotton fabric was difficult for their advanced minds to accept. Dr. Kintar stepped forward with their scientific instruments powered down for once. I have requested that Dr. Wells document other primitive techniques that might prove useful in emergency situations. Our species has become so dependent on technology that we have forgotten the basic skills our ancestors once possessed. Lieutenant, Hexron raised one of his long arms. Captain, with respect, how can we be certain that this method will work for all crew members? Our attempts on the planet's surface showed that the technique requires abilities we may not all possess. Kira moved to the center of the group, carrying her simple cotton sock. The aliens watched with fascination as she held up the plain piece of fabric that had saved their lives. The sock isn't magic, she explained. It's just a tool. What matters is understanding how to use it properly. She gestured to the viewing screens that showed the planet's surface below them. Millions of Glow-Beetles continued their eternal dance through the alien forests, completely unaware that they had become the salvation of an entire starship crew. Your people think in terms of control and prediction, Kira continued. You analyze problems until you understand every variable. Then you build machines to handle those variables perfectly. But some problems can't be solved that way. Commander Vex High nodded thoughtfully. The beetles respond to intention and energy rather than mechanical force. Our usual approach frightened them away before we could even attempt capture. Exactly. Kira agreed. So we had to learn their language instead of forcing them to understand ours. We had to become part of their world instead of imposing our world on them. Over the next several hours, Kira organized training sessions throughout the ship. She taught small groups of Zephyrians how to quiet their analytical minds and trust their intuitive responses. It was difficult for them at first, like asking someone to forget how to read and write. Chief Engineer Mordak was one of the most challenging students. His mind was completely focused on mechanical solutions and logical processes. When he tried to catch beetles using the sock method, his movements were jerky and robotic. The creatures avoided him easily. I cannot turn off my engineering training, he complained after his fifth failed attempt. My mind automatically calculates trajectory and timing. The beetles sense this calculation and flee. Kira sat down beside him on the observation deck, watching the practice sessions happening around them. Don't try to turn off your engineering skills. Use them differently. I do not understand. Think of it as designing advance instead of building a machine, Kira suggested. Engineers understand rhythm and flow when they design things like water systems or air circulation. The beetles move in patterns just like water or air. Mordek's crystalline features brightened with understanding. Fluid dynamics. The beetles follow currents of air and energy, creating flows and eddies just like any other fluid system. Now you're getting it, Kira smiled. Design yourself to be part of their flow instead of an obstacle to it. His next attempt was much more successful. By thinking of the beetles as a flowing system instead of individual targets, he was able to position himself correctly and capture 3 of them in one gentle sweep. Word of the training sessions spread throughout the ship. Crew members who had been weak with hunger began volunteering to learn the new techniques. Some picked it up quickly, while others needed more practice. But everyone could learn it with patience and guidance. Dr. Kintar became particularly skilled at the method, using her scientific mind to study the beetles' behavior patterns while keeping her physical movements intuitive and natural. It is remarkable, she told Kira during one session. I am using both halves of my brain simultaneously in a way I never learned before. As days passed, the Zephyrians established regular hunting expeditions to the planet's surface. They developed a rotation system so that everyone could practice the new skills while ensuring the ship always had enough food. The emergency was over, but the learning continued. Captain Zorthik called another assembly after a week of successful beetle hunting. This time, the crew looked completely different. Their lights were bright and steady, their movements confident and energetic. They had not only survived their crisis, but had grown stronger because of it. Dr. Wells, the captain announced formally, on behalf of my crew and my people, I offer you an honorary position in the Zephyrian Survival course. We would like you to travel to other ships in our fleet and teach these techniques to our people throughout the galaxy. The offer surprised Kira, but she understood its importance. I accept, Captain, but I have one condition. Name it. I want to learn from your people too. Humans have survival skills that you need, but you have knowledge and abilities that we could use. This should be a real partnership. Commander Vexhai stepped forward carrying a special container. Inside was Kira's original sock, the one she had used to catch the first beetles. We have prepared this display for our ship's museum. It will remind future generations that advancement sometimes means remembering the wisdom of simplicity. Kira looked at her old sock sitting in its place of honor and started laughing. The sound was so joyful that even the serious Zephyrians began making their own musical laughter sounds. The idea that a piece of cotton fabric knitted by her grandmother would end up in an alien museum struck her as wonderfully absurd. You know what the funny part is? She said as her laughter died down. My grandmother always told me that her socks would take me places I never imagined. I just never thought she meant other planets. As the Astral Dawn continued its journey through space, now with fully functional food synthesizers and emergency protocols that included primitive survival techniques, the crew carried with them a new understanding of what it meant to be intelligent. Sometimes the smartest thing you could do was to stop trying to be smart and just pay attention to the world around you. The Glow-Beetles of Kepler 442b continued their ancient dance through the forest below, completely unaware that they had taught an entire civilization the value of simplicity. And somewhere in the ship's museum, a simple cotton sock served as proof that the best solutions often come from the most unexpected places.